AI become conscious? I would say it's very possible. Maybe not right now, but definitely in the future I think it'll be possible.
No, at current stage it can't be.
No.
Because current AI is more about statistics, like it's trying to calculate different possibilities and give you the most possible answer. But at this stage, I don't think it can be conscious.
The AI can only do what it is programmed to do. I don't think you can program consciousness. Consciousness at the level of metaphysics requires a different order of being, and I just don't think you've got that in electronic circuits.
It's one of the biggest mysteries of our time, and as we just heard, some have a different opinion. But to even begin to answer it, we first have to agree. What is consciousness? Now this is a fight. There is struggle and it's tiring. But beneath the chaos, there is a program running. It's a constant loop of detecting a problem, finding a solution, and executing a move. In philosophy, this practical thinking is called access consciousness. It's the brain acting like a computer. It tackles the so-called easy problem of the mind, taking in data and spitting out an action. And because it's just data processing, it's the one part of being human that we can teach a machine to do. But there is another side to this. Look at his face. This feels like something. There is panic, pressure, and pain. A robot can be programmed to detect pressure on a joint and tap out. That's just data processing. This is the hard problem, or phenomenal consciousness. The question isn't whether an AI can think, it's whether it can feel. Right now, you feel like one person. The you that is understanding these words and the you that feels the weight of the phone in your hand, they feel like they are happening in the exact same place. We assume that thinking and feeling are roommates. If we find the house, we find them both. But recently, neuroscience has suggested that our map is wrong. The thinking part and the feeling part might not just be in different rooms, they might be fundamentally different biological processes. So, what gives? To understand more, I'll need help from an expert.
My name is Nao Tsuchiya. I'm a professor in Monash University, School of Psychological Sciences. My lab is focused on to understand the physical substrate of consciousness.
To understand the brain, you have to understand its history. For centuries, science had a strict rule. If you couldn't observe it from the outside, it didn't count.
The turning point was probably René Descartes in 17th centuries, right? What he said is basically to introduce this extrinsic perspective about consciousness. He divided the world into two. The one that we can observe and also measure and intersubjectively agreeable. And that is the world where the science and also engineering should be focusing on. And then another world is the mental, that may be different for each other and also may be difficult to measure as well.
This created what's called the extrinsic perspective. We assumed that if a rat acted like it was hungry, it was hungry. If a human screamed like they were in pain, they were in pain. The behavior was the only thing that mattered.
Only things that we can observe, like behavior or a physical object, can be the study object of the science. And this attitude is strong, really strong right now.
Because this view relies on output, like speaking, reporting, and acting, it led scientists to believe consciousness lived in the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the core of logic, language, and high-level reasoning.
And that leads to this front theory of consciousness as well. Like because of the consciousness, we can do metacognition, we have a long-term memory, we can plan better, and so on. That's a very dominant kind of approach, so-called functionalistic approach in consciousness.
But in the 1990s, we got a new tool, neuroimaging. Suddenly, we didn't need you to speak. We could see the brain dreaming, hallucinating, and feeling, all without a single word being spoken.
The critical hit was the neuroimaging device. Now we can observe what's happening in the brain, right? While people are not even reporting or reporting about something like, let's say, dream or hallucination or synesthesia and so on. Everything has a physical basis right now, we know.
This technology allowed for a new perspective, the intrinsic view. The idea that we shouldn't study just what the brain does, the function, but what the brain is, the structure. This is what's called the consciousness-first approach. It flips the standard model on its head, and instead of assuming the physical world is the real thing and your mind is just a byproduct, it argues that consciousness is the starting line. It is the only thing we know for sure exists.
If you really think about the consciousness first view, then you don't care about functions. And then if you don't care about functions and then look at this, observe that phenomenology, consciousness, very, very carefully, in the end, you probably will end up with sort of the backside kind of view, I would imagine. But if you really think about functions of consciousness, then you probably naturally result in this front theory of consciousness.
And this is the crux of the divergence. If you think consciousness is about intelligence, planning, reporting, speaking, you look at the front. This is the functionalist view. But if you think consciousness is about experience, the redness of a rose, the feeling of pain, you look at the back. This is the structuralist view. Scientifically, this is the standoff between the global neuronal workspace theory and the integrated information theory. And while the front theory is easy to measure, Professor Tsuchiya believes that to find the ghost in the machine, we have to stop looking at the output and start looking at the internal geometry of the mind.
And that includes, for example, the popular theories called global neural workspace theory, or the one that I'm pushing, integrated information theory, and so on. Trying to understand what is the sort of the structure of this consciousness. For example, how this richness of this perception, or how memory and attention and the consciousness relate to each other in this structured way. Try to understand what is the structure of the consciousness. And this one can be completely dissociated from this functional picture.
So the front says consciousness is about doing. The back says consciousness is about being. And this is where we run into the problem with artificial intelligence. Because if we look at the AI we have today, the chatbots, the art generators, the deepfakes, they are the ultimate example of the front of the brain view. They are pure function. To understand if AI can be conscious, we have to look at what it's actually doing right now. Despite the hype, modern AI like large language models isn't thinking in the way you or I do. It's not reflecting on its childhood or wondering about the meaning of life. It is essentially a statistical parrot. It works by ingesting a massive amount of human data, books, articles, Reddit threads. It turns all that language into a map of mathematical relationships. When you ask it a question, it doesn't understand the answer. It calculates the probability of which word comes next. However, if you side with the structuralists, if you believe consciousness requires a specific internal structure, a feeling of existence, then all of this sophisticated behavior is a magic trick. We have built a machine that is incredible at acting conscious without actually being conscious. So we return to the question that started this video. We know that AI can act like us, it can speak and pass exams. But if we strip away the function and look at the structure, is there anyone home?
So this is a prediction, okay? I'm not 100% believing, but if this theory is correct, the current AI is likely to be not conscious. As such, I feel current probability that the AI, for example, GPT is conscious is almost minimally close to zero, really close to zero.
According to the integrated information theory, the reason isn't about the software, it's about the hardware. Current AI runs on standard computer chips and the flow of information is mostly one way. It is what scientists call feed forward. But the brain is a web. It loops back on itself. It is integrated. To Professor Tsuchiya, consciousness lives in that web, and because current computers don't have that physical structure, they can't have the experience. However, this doesn't mean AI can't become conscious, it just means we're building it wrong. If the structuralists are right, we don't need code to make AI feel. We need a better body.
Because if this theory is correct, then all we need is to generate some kind of structure, physical substrate that generates this huge amount of integrated information. And in fact, the easiest way to generate such a thing in an artificial way is to artificially generate a biological system. And that's already being done. It's called brain organoids. But we don't have the proper theories to predict or imagine what these brain organoids are doing. Or we can imagine an artificial network that actually does kind of the physical computation or physical cause-effect interaction like the brain does.
AI becoming conscious. I think it is a scary thought, sure. If AI were to become conscious, what would it do? Would it be a sort of like a good? Would it be a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, we don't really know. So there's a lot of unknowns there. That's why I think it is scary.